I have a lot of things to say, so I'm really happy that Malte ended early. That means I have more time, doesn't it? Well, while the technique is getting up and running, I think I started in 2007. I started a company with a couple of other guys, a consultancy company called Collaboration. And there, one of our key issues in the process of collaboration that we identified was the starting of this process. That we identified as, we worked with having a gift of knowledge as the starting point. So I would like to start with giving you a gift of knowledge, and that's of course because afterwards I will exploit you to a scientific experiment. So first, the gift of knowledge I will give you is a word that I myself encountered for the first time yesterday, and which is very relevant for today's theme. It was open washing. Open washing. So I think they, in the article I read there, I think they meant that, some people might be exploiting the concept of openness a little bit these days. And kind of throwing it in as at a bit random stage. But so keep that in mind. Well, my presentation today, I'm really happy. The whole idea of ecosystems, triple helixes and so forth have been mentioned by all speakers more or less. And I'm on completely the same page, so I'm very happy about that. I don't feel that too many of my points have been taken. But before I get talking, I have this scientific experiment. Actually, I think you should all stand up. So you will now get an envelope, each of you, and don't open it yet, because it's very important that on the count of 3, sorry. Okay, I'll just try to yell instead. On the count of 3, you open the envelope, and I will time which one of you that figures out and performs the instruction first. Have everybody understood? I count to 3, you open your envelope, there's a piece of paper. And and I will time which one is the first to perform the instruction, and I will time how long time it will take for. No.
It doesn't like.
For all of you. For all of you to perform the instruction. Have you understood?
Yes.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, go. All right! Good job. I think that, it didn't take very long until somebody shouted. And you could say, that was actually, I guess that was the one that had the note saying shout. You could claim that you also performed the instruction. Then some of you started to yell red and blue and so forth. Why did you do that? I heard you shouted a color. Why?
We worked together. Shout color.
You shared information.
Yeah.
Oh. Is there anybody that have a patented envelope or confidential envelope or something like that? What did you do? Good. The 4 words in the envelope was shout your favorite color. So of course it's a very simple set of data. But still I think it's, but to get something intelligible out of it, then you needed to share the information. And now you can sit down. No, what I wanted to get at was that, of course, I think this is a picture of what we experience out in the world all the time. To get something intelligible out of all the information and data that we experience, we usually need to kind of get additional data from other people, talk to our friends, to our colleagues, to customers, co-workers, and then put together some kind of picture and at some point act on it. Sometimes if you act very fast, you will only get part of the message. You will just shout. when you wait to get a little bit more of information, then you will shout a color or an idea or something like that. And then sometimes you sit with a piece of information in your hand where there's a little tag on it saying this is patented or it's confidential or something. And sometimes that has some kind of effect on what we do. Last time I did this exercise, there was about 50 people in the room and people were sitting in groups. And I think the instruction there was stand on one leg. And it was because in the end, everybody was standing on one leg except one girl that sat there on her chair with an envelope in her lap saying confidential. So she hadn't dared to open the envelope. So I think that's an important point now when I start to talk about IP, that of course there's a whole kind of legal dogmatic aspect of IP. You get a patent, that's the monopoly on an invention. You can say to others they cannot use that for commercial purposes and so forth. But it's also important to remember that the moment when you talk about a patent or confidentiality and so forth, it not only has a legal effect, it also has a social effect. So even though that for instance, a patented technology, you can use that home in your kitchen for your own purposes. That's not infringing the patent. But still, the fact that something is patented might create some kind of confusion or feeling with people, that they feel that this is a closed thing or something like that. So I think that's important to consider when you talk about IP. Okay, but for this presentation, I will talk about ecosystems and IPR in life sciences. And since we haven't got that many time, I'll kind of more go through, try to identify some of the challenges in this process. A lot of the points have kind of been made from different perspectives by the previous speakers, which I think is really cool. So I'll just jump into it. Well, if we look at the ecosystem in pharma, then, the process starts around this discovery. My background is not scientific. I'm a lawyer and I have a degree in philosophy. So everything concerning wet science and stuff like that is really crude and representational. So sorry about that. But we started discovery. In 2013, the average cost of the discovery process when developing a pharmaceutical in the US anyway was about 430 million. Then from that you get drugs or treatments that you develop. That is put into meet the regulatory requirements where you do clinical trial data. The average cost of that was $965 million in 2013. From that, you get some safety and efficacy results that you don't die from taking the drugs, and the drug actually performs some kind of effect that are better than just eating an aspirin. Then you send it to production and to the market, which costs an average of $466 million. You get some money back from the market that you can reinvest in discovery, and that's kind of how that goes around. You have a pear tart. Voila. A pear tart that costs $1.4 billion to take from discovery to market, and then an additional $466 million in post-market costs, what it costs to do pharmacovigilance and whatever comes after the marketing. In 2013, peak sales of the average peak sales were $466 million. So quick math, there might be a little gap in income somewhere there, and that is usually presented as one of the key drivers of why pharma is flirting with open innovation to solve this little riddle. How do you solve this problem? Well, first of all, you can say the business model here is that you have the discovery here. From whatever you find here, you will patent that. The patents are what makes it possible for you to get the money in here. So the question is, what does it take to make a pear tart? Does it take patents to make a pear tart? No, it takes pears. So we have to look at, is there any other sources of value where you can maybe leverage this investment? Some of the other places and some of the things that have been focused at in this open innovation in pharma is the different sources of data and how you can leverage that and use that, often to try to minimize this cost up here. If you get some better data here, for instance, then you might be able not to spend that many money here on discovery. The trouble is then that if you take in data from here, you're not sure you can get patents, because to get a patent, you need to develop something new, something that haven't been disclosed. So what is often considered a hindrance for openness in pharma is that, if we don't get if we open up, we don't get patents. If we don't get patents, we don't get the money. And the problem is that this discovery cost, that's only $430 million, but the really big cost down here, $965 million. We haven't really broken the riddle of how to leverage that through openness yet. So my point would be, well, openness in pharma, I think there's a big progress in trying to solve that part of the mathematical riddle here and how to get revenue. But the riddle is really down here, the regulatory requirements, which we are really happy that they are, because we don't want drugs that we die from, and we would prefer drugs that actually work. So open source drug discovery is one of the initiatives that, especially in India, they're very, very good at this and developed the whole process of open source drug discovery in relation to tuberculosis and malaria, where they crowdsource kind of this discovery part. So they have a lot of people engaged in finding good targets and so forth. So they have kind of found a way to leverage this. The challenge is, of course, then it's difficult to get the patents that would usually create the income here to pay for the regulatory requirements. Since they are dealing with malaria and tuberculosis and other serious diseases for large populations, then the government in India obviously have big interest in financing this. So as far as I've been able to find out, then the next step in their model is to find stakeholders that are actually interested in paying for this part of the process, people that have other interests in getting this drug to market. Governments is a big financier of this, or foundation, Bill Gates Foundation and so forth. Then when you get to the production market, well, you can say, well, here you can have a clear, if you have a finished product that have gotten a marketing approval here, then to put it into production, it's that's more kind of into basic business. You have a product, it costs something to produce it, the production costs, and you can sell it on the market for that cost. And the good thing about pharmaceuticals is that they're often fairly cheap to produce. They're expensive to develop, but fairly cheap to produce. So when you have kind of covered this and this, then this is workable. Another possibility is alternative IP strategies. For instance, Lundbeck, they have made a collaboration, a pre-competitive collaboration, where they have a patented schizophrenic mouse. They have developed a mouse that is schizophrenic, or potentially very schizophrenic, which is very, very good to have when you try to develop drugs to cure schizophrenia. So, and they have a patent on it, so obviously they have a big competitive advantage. But they also say that, well, from getting to having this mouse to actually have an effective drug is very far. We cannot cover that distance by ourselves. So they collaborate with other pharma companies. They have a pre-competitive knowledge common, where they share their patent on this mouse, or they allow them to use that patent. So you can make different licensing arrangements with the patents, so you get other sources of income than the kind of clean monopoly income of having money for your drug, but saying, okay, if our patents have other uses, we can license it to other applications, other uses, so have additional income there. Then there is what I also mentioned briefly, there's this whole part over here where there's a lot of data of different kind developed. There's the data from the regulatory requirements, the clinical trial data, which you're also obliged to, which is in EU anyway, put into a database by the European Medical Agency, because there's a new EU rule saying they are obliged to do that. But to have access to that data might spur potential of finding second indications of drugs. There's also the building of networks, having collaborations with patient organizations, with healthcare professionals. In orphan drugs, there's a lot of companies very active in that, in the orphan drug industry, building relation to patient organizations, healthcare professionals, and so forth. So there's a lot of value created there through networks, which might help leveraging this process. And then finally, buzzword is real-world evidence, which is, well, big data, mining of data from different sources. That could be the data from practitioners, from doctors, off-label prescriptions. How does the drug actually perform when meeting reality outside of the laboratory setting that it meets down here? Can we source experience in from there and then back into discovery and create new drugs from the basis of something that we already have? So that's also a possible source of creating leverage in this process through insourcing data from the outside. A point of this final issue is that might also procure a competitive edge, because in the new EU directive on public procurement, in Denmark, there's a company that takes care of buying drugs for the different hospitals in Denmark. That's done centrally from, I think they're called Amgen or something like that, or M something. Anybody remember the name? AM something, yeah. Okay, but they buy it. But there's the rules on public procurement that you need to make a tender to say, okay, we need to buy 100 million doses of this drug. Who can offer this drug at the best price? Usually the award criteria for getting a tender would be the best price. Okay, but in this new directive it says that the award criteria must be the most economically advantageous tender. And in figuring out what the most economically advantageous tender, you can take into consideration the life cycle costs of the drug. What is the life cycle cost of the drug? I think that question is just as good as we started to talk about CO2 footprints and stuff like that. But I think a good guess would be that you need to be able to collect this real-world evidence and say, okay, from this drug is developed and we have the regulatory, we document the efficiency. What are the costs of the drug when it actually hits the market? Does it have side effects? How does it perform in create a better life quality for the patients and so forth? All that, you need to be able to collect this data here. So I think there's could be both opportunities to create leverage for the pharma companies, and there would also be a lot of additional business opportunities for other companies that could assist the pharma companies in doing this. Because if they're good at doing this, I think they have better cards on their hand to get these public tenders and this life cycle analysis of the pharma, of the drugs. So, with these words, I think it's time to go to the question session.
That is during the networking.
That's during the networking, yeah, cool. Well, then I'll just say thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the evening.